Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Google Hangout on air here with the Wildlife Conservation Society. My name is Megan Malaska, and I will be hosting for today. We are really excited about another one of our fabulous Hangouts. I wanted to welcome all the viewers at home, as well as the two schools that will be joining us today. We have Miss Rayer's 6th grade class from Staten Island School for Civic Leadership. And we also have Miss Stern's 12th grade class from Bronx High School of the Visual Arts. So hello classes, hello viewers at home. We are really excited. If you don't know anything about the Wildlife Conservation Society, many people know about our 5 parks, which are located in New York City. We have the Bronx Zoo, Central Park Zoo, Queens Zoo, Prospect Park Zoo, and New York Aquarium, but we're also a global organization. So what that means is we are all over the world. We have about 500 projects in about 60 different countries, so we're all over the place. And today's topic, we're going to focus on Visionmaker, New York City, and we are really happy to have Dr. Eric Sanderson here with us to describe the project and also interact with our students, answer questions that they have, and learn some more so viewers at home can play around with Visionmaker afterwards as well. So just to give you a little bit of insider scoop about this wonderful man sitting to my right. So Dr. Eric Sanderson is the author of 2 wonderful books, Mannahatta, as well as Terra Nova. We have them on visual display here too. There you go. And he has been the leader along with his team in this Visionmaker New York City project, which we're really excited to have him go into more depth about and tell all the viewers at home about as well. So without further ado, before we get started also, I just wanted to, if you wanted to send any questions in, you can do it through the Google Hangout Q&A app, or you can also send a hashtag to us on Twitter or any other social media, which is WCS Visionmaker HOA. So you can send those to that. And without further ado, welcoming me with Dr. Eric Sanderson. So,
Megan. Hi, everybody.
So the first question is, how did you come up with this idea for Visionmaker?
Yeah, so Visionmaker is this brand new website that we just launched last year that allows you to create and then share visions of what you'd like to see for the future of the city, for the future of New York. And we started out with just Manhattan, and that's because as I wrote this big book about what Manhattan was like 400 years ago when it was Mannahatta, and that's what the Indians called it. And I spent 10 years actually working in detail about what the wildlife was like and the 55 ecosystems and telling the story about the ecology of Manhattan before it was a big city. And toward the end of the book, we were thinking about, well, what does that mean about the future of the city? And I had some ideas I wrote about in the book, but then we thought, well, you know, why should I be the only one who gets to have an idea about the future of the city? We all have ideas about the future of the city we want to live in, and particularly kids do, because they're going to be living in the city in the future. And so we created this new website called Visionmaker.NYC, where you can create your own vision, you can evaluate it, and then if you like, you can share it with everybody else.
Wonderful. So,
and we have some pictures, I think.
We do.
That I'll just talk to. So I think we're going to show you some slides now. Do we get to see them too?
I think so.
Oops.
Give me a second.
Coming up now. There we go. So here you can see 2 pictures of the very same place, just apart in time. So you see there Mannahatta, that's the green island on one side, and you can see it's matched with Manhattan in the middle of New York City on the other side. And you can see there's some big differences, right? Like Manhattan Island today is much broader than it was 400 years ago, and that's because we've actually filled the land to make it wider. You can see that the ecosystems have changed, and so on one side it's green, and you can see forests and wetlands and streams and beaches and that sort of thing. And that's one kind of ecosystem, but actually buildings are a kind of ecosystem too. and so are streets and sidewalks and parks, and so you can see that the ecosystems have really changed. And then the third thing is that the species that live here have really changed. So 400 years ago, there were 1,000 different species living on Manhattan. Today, there's a smaller number of species. We actually don't know exactly how many. And the big difference, of course, is that the human population of Manhattan 400 years ago was maybe 300 or 600 people. And now there's 1.6 million people that live on Manhattan and about 8 million people in the city as a whole. So those make big differences, right? They really change the players. So we created this new website, so Mannahatta2409.org, which is a way of which we're now calling Visionmaker.NYC. That's the new version because we're in the process of extending it over all of the city, just not from Manhattan to all of New York City. So Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, Staten Island, all the waters in between. That's the new version. And I'll walk you through that in just a minute.
Wonderful. So we have some questions now from Ms. Stern's 12th grade class.
Yeah. So that's
Hi,
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. So I was wondering, since the Bronx has a high asthma rate, what kind of action could we take now as students to help create a change and make the Bronx a healthier place to live?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So Visionmaker is all about the environment of the city, and part of the reason why there's such high asthma rates here in the Bronx is because of air pollution, right? And that air pollution comes from the kind of energy we use and the kind of ways we transport. So with Visionmaker, you can actually create visions that don't depend so much on fossil fuels and depend more on electricity from renewable sources. We'll show you how to do that. And you can also change the transportation type. So, right now, there are subways, but of course we know in the Bronx, the subways are really about going to Manhattan, right? They're not really about getting around in the Bronx very much. And most of the people in the Bronx, when they get around, they either take cars or they take the bus. And those things tend to make a lot of pollution, and that affects our ability to breathe and therefore high asthma rates. So you will be able to create a vision right now for Manhattan, but this summer for the Bronx that would have less air pollution, and therefore hopefully less asthma rates.
Thank you.
Okay,
Great
thank
question.
you.
Do we have another question, please?
number 3.
Hello. Hi. My name is Jordy out in Congo.
Hi, Jordy.
Hi. How you doing? Would introducing solar panels on top of every subway station in the Bronx have a positive impact?
Well, that's a great question. Yep. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Jordy.
How so? How would it impact?
Yeah, well, that's actually one of the reasons why I made Visionmaker and why my team here at WCS did, is because nobody actually knows the answer to that question, right? Like how many solar panels do we need to have on New York City so that we could supply, I don't know, 100% of our energy from renewable sources, or 50%, or 10%? And what should the goal be, right?
Mm-hmm.
The mayor has a goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions in the city by 80% by 2050. So, certainly it would help, and there's a lot of good things that would help, but would that meet the goal? That's the kind of thing that Visionmaker actually tells you, because you can actually paint solar panels on top of buildings, and then it'll actually tell you how many kilowatt hours of electricity comes from that as opposed to other sources. And because I don't really know the answer to the question. I mean, it's a good thing, obviously an incrementally good thing, a relatively good thing, but is it a sufficient thing? That's what we need to know about the environment of the city.
And how can we add more recycling bins around the Bronx, like on every corner?
More kind of what?
How can we add more recycling bins, more green bins, blue bins to recycle?
Yeah. Well, so those are all about policy issues, right? Like how do we manage the city, and what kind of encouragement does the government give to, say, recycling or paper recycling? And in New York, we're lucky to have a recycling program, but we all know it's not sufficient. And that's part because, you know, the market isn't completely developed for the recycled materials. So actually part of what we pay to pay for our garbage actually is going to support the recycling. So it doesn't really pay for itself yet. So we need to, you know, work to a form of the economy where all those things actually goes back into the economy and actually people can make money on it. And then we'll have recycling bins everywhere.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for the questions.
I think we have one more from Ms. Stern's class.
That's great.
Hi,
That's great.
my name is.
Okay, all right.
We got one more? Okay.
Some of the public transportation buses were replaced with hybrids, cleaner technologies. Do you already see a measurable impact as a result of the change, or will it take a while to perceive any difference?
So that's again something you can explore through Visionmaker. You can change the transportation, and you can change the kinds of modes of transportation. So you can have hybrid buses or streetcars, which are kind of like the express buses we have now. Not the express buses, the select buses. This thing called bus rapid transit, which is actually trying to use buses like they were streetcars. And so again, it depends on how many streets and how many buses. So yeah, it makes a difference. But does it make it a whole difference? Does it make a difference to the amount of carbon dioxide that's in the air in the Bronx? That's the question we're trying to answer, or in Manhattan or the rest of the city. And so Visionmaker is actually a tool for us all to explore these kinds of issues.
All right.
Great. Thank you so much, Ms. Stern's class. Those are excellent questions. And now I want to turn it back to Eric and ask him if he can walk us through the tool and give us some examples.
Yeah. So it's kind of hard to imagine what I'm talking about until you actually see it. So now we're going to show you kind of how it works. So we're going to show you some slides again. Coming back.
Wow, I wonder.
All right. So when if you go to visionmaker.nyc, so that we have a beta version of the website that's live now, it gives you two choices. You can make a new vision, or you can browse existing visions that other people have made. A vision is an idea for a particular part of the city. So if you're making a new vision, you see this page here, and you give your vision a name, and you give it a year, and you give it a description, and then you say, where do you want to start? Do you want to start with the existing ecosystems of the city today, or do you want to start with the ecosystems of 400 years ago? And it's also possible to start with somebody else's vision if you go out through the other route, if you go through the other branch. So next slide. And so what you see is then this web map that allows you to zoom into the city, and you can see the blocks of the city, and it's kind of like Minecraft, right? You see these little blocks, and these blocks represent different building types. That's the pinks and the purples. They represent different transportation types, the yellows and the oranges. You can see subways and that sort of thing. You can see what's in the city today, or if you go to the next slide, you can see the ecosystems of 400 years ago. So in this case, the green colors showing forest, and the light green color are wetlands. You can see streams and ponds, that sort of thing. And you can see that they lay right on top of each other, like one has replaced the other. And then these tools on the side allow you to actually change those ecosystems, to change the buildings or change the forest type. And so if you go to the next slide, you can see that you can paint single-family homes, or you can paint office buildings. You can change the stadiums. So next slide. Yeah, so office buildings or stadiums, all kinds of built ecosystems. You can make natural ecosystems like marshes or forests or wetlands. Next. You can change the transportation types. So you could put a superhighway down the middle of Manhattan, or you could change it to streetcar lines, or you could add subway lines. Go to the next one. These are all modifiers, so green roofs and so forth. So there's two other things you can change. You can change the lifestyle of the people living in the city in the future. And we have 5 lifestyles right now. We have average New Yorker, average American, average Earthling, what we call a Lenape person, so like a Native American person, and then an eco-hipster. I don't know, there was a question about can they see the slides in a bigger window?
I think that's something that our Lisa hopefully will be able to take care of. I don't think that's anything we can control.
So we have Lisa's helping us in the background, and maybe she'll try and make it bigger while we're talking, but we want to keep going so we stay on time. So you can change the ecosystems, you can change the lifestyle, and then the third thing you can do, if you go to the next slide, is change the climate scenario. And we have, again, 5 climate scenarios. You have the climate of the past, the climate of what's considered today, the 1970 to 2000 climate, a 2020 prediction of the climate, a 2050, and a 2080. And you can see on these little slides at the bottom that the blue color is up. That's because the sea level is predicted to rise. And the current predictions are that the sea levels around New York City will rise a meter by the end of this century. So that's 3 feet of higher water on average, right? Let alone a storm like Hurricane Sandy or anything. So that's a big deal. So then you use the device to select these things to create your vision that's some composition of the ecosystems, the lifestyle, and the climate. And then when you get a vision that you like, if we go to the next slide, you can then see metrics of how it works. So you can see each of these bands tells you the amount of stormwater. The next one's the carbon one. It tells you about the greenhouse gas emissions. We tell you about the species diversity of your vision, and then we tell you about the population. And the gold line is the value for your vision. The green line is the value for that place 400 years ago when it was a wild place. And the brown line is your vision today. So you can see all these different performance metrics: water, carbon, the water cycle, the carbon cycle, the species diversity, and the population, just like we talk about in science class. Go to the next slide. Oh, there we go. So water, carbon, biodiversity, and population. And you can see how you can compare the values, right? So in this just made up example, we painted green roofs on some buildings in Midtown, and you can see that's really reduced the stormwater, the amount of water that comes from a rainstorm and flows into the storm drains. And you can see that today, it's about 3 million gallons of water that come from a rainstorm. With the green roofs, it would reduce it to about 2 million gallons. And if we go back 400 years ago when it's a forest, all of the stormwater is handled by the trees and by the soil and by the streams. Anyway, you can make these other comparisons for carbon and biodiversity and population. So depending on what your goal is, you could do various kinds of interventions to try an improvement. The next slide, yep. And then once you get a vision, you can work on it privately for as long as you want. And then when you want, you can choose to make it public and to share it with everybody else. And then other people can see your vision of that same place. And if they like, they can take that vision and they can make it their own and change it and then share it again. And we've recently created some new functionality just for schools where teachers can give their students a challenge, and then the students can post their visions to that challenge in an internal working group just for the class. And so then you can see who can meet that challenge in the most efficient way, and what are all the different ways to do that, whether that's reducing asthma rates like we were talking about, or reducing our reliance on fossil fuels, or meeting the mayor's goal about climate change, or increasing the biodiversity. We like that at WCS. So,
definitely.
Yeah. So that's just a very snapshot how it works. And I'll just repeat the URL. It's Visionmaker.nyc. You can also go to Mannahatta2409.org. That'll get you there too.
Great. And one of the analogies that I really like is the Minecraft analogy for Visionmaker. So
yeah, we kind of think it's like WCS times Facebook, right? Because it's all about sharing, times Minecraft, right? And I don't know if the kids in the audience that they play Minecraft, but my son plays Minecraft all the time. And when I was showing this, he's like, "Oh, Daddy, this is like Minecraft." And it's kind of like Minecraft. It's a little bit more about like science and imagining the future. You can't really. There's no swords, no bows.
Safer Minecraft.
It's a safer Minecraft. Yeah. Also a little flatter, but yeah.
Great. And now we have some questions from Miss Rayer's 6th grade class. So if you guys are ready with your questions, come on up.
Okay, here we go. Okay, my name's Emmanuel. My question is, What is the development plan for the tool? For example, we would like to see Visionmaker in a 3D similar to Google Earth. Do you foresee Visionmaker to have a vision where a person can walk around in their visions that we design?
Yeah, totally. Hey, I like your T-shirt.
I was going to say, that's a cool shirt there.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've had exactly that same idea. We would love to have a Google Glass version or an Oculus Rift version of Visionmaker. Where you could look around at the city where you are today and get measurements of what's there. Like, oh, I wonder how much greenhouse gas emissions that building's making, right? Or God, I wonder how much stormwater. Oh wow, if I look over at the forest, there's all these different plants and animals over there, right? That'd be so cool. And then to not only see what's there, but to see different versions of what could be there. I think that's what's really cool about it. So yeah, we'd love to see that. And even 5 years ago, that would have been just kind of a fantasy, right? That's something you would write in a science fiction novel. Today we're actually pretty close to having the technology to do that kind of thing.
Thank you.
Great question.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh. Nice shirt.
Hey, you guys all have the same shirt.
My name is Rayhan, and my question is, in Visionmaker, how are the calculations estimated or collaborated for the environmental performance? For example, when we add stories onto our buildings, what is the calculation or explanation for the carbon dioxide numbers rising?
Yeah, thanks, Fran. That's a great question. And of course, it has kind of a long answer, but I'm just going to give you the short answer. So basically what happens is when you change the ecosystems or change the lifestyle or change the climate, then there are models in the background. So there's mathematical models, and they make calculations. And the very first thing they do is they calculate how much floor area there is of the ecosystems in your vision. So if you make a very tall building, you add stories, it's going to create more floor area, right? And if it's an apartment building, it'll add more places for people to live. It's an office building. And then we have parameters to describe how much energy an office building uses or an apartment uses. And that's how it calculates how much greenhouse gases it would come from. So basically it does area, calculates area first. That's the most important thing. And then it calculates how many people will be living there, or what kind of uses are going there, how much energy they require, and then what fuels are used to satisfy that energy, and then how much greenhouse gases comes from those fuels. Yeah? Yep. So good question. And although that all sounds complicated, it's actually something that you guys could do. Like you could figure it out for your classroom. You could measure the classroom, figure out how big the area is. You could go and look on the panel and see how much electricity is. You can figure out where the electricity comes from. And in New York, it's partly nuclear, it's partly natural gas, it's a little bit of coal, it's a little bit of renewables, it's a little bit of hydro. And then you can calculate how many greenhouse gases come from turning on the light in your classroom.
Thank you.
You guys have the math to do that.
I think we have one more question.
Hi, I'm Amuna. My question is, do you think users will take advantage of the ecosystem tool and increase their population? Should there be different limits to different buildings? For instance, should there be a realistic limit on buildings within divisions?
Yeah, what do you think?
I think there should be.
Yeah? What would you make it be?
I don't know. 100?
Yeah. So I think we should be talking about these issues, right? Like how many people should be living in New York City, and how desirable is that, right? Because as the population increases, you get some good things. You get more economy. You get more culture, right? You have more of a tax base, and so government always wants the population to grow because it makes all those things happen. But we also know that if the infrastructure doesn't keep up, then it also makes the trains more crowded, right? It makes the apartment building more crowded. It creates, this kind of rushed, crazy feeling that we have in New York. And people like to think that New York City's population has always increased, but in fact, at least for Manhattan, that the highest population for Manhattan was in 1910, over 100 years ago. 100 years ago, there were 2.2 million people living in Manhattan. Today, there's 2.2 million. Today, there's about 1.6 million. So, so the population does go up and down. And, I think that's an important part of the city, part of its environment, and also what it means as a cultural place to live and as a good place for us to live. So when I create vision, sometimes I do decrease the population. Other times I try and find ways of keeping the population, keeping the environmental performance, right? So how do we keep the population the same, but make sure nobody lives in a place that gets flooded when there's a big storm? Or how do we keep the population the same, but change the renewable energy so we don't make so many greenhouse gas emissions? And if you can figure that out, you'll make $1 million, right? Like that's the thing we're all looking for, is this vision of cities that are great places to live and also are good places for the environment.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your question.
Thank you. So now that the participants have a better feel for Visionmaker, do you have any mapped out examples that we could show to them?
I think we have some more slides. So we just made some examples of things that you could do with Visionmaker. So for example, this is just Lower Manhattan. This is actually Community Board 1 in Lower Manhattan. And so this is the ecosystems of 400 years ago, the Mannahatta ecosystem. So that's one vision of that part of the city. Here's another vision. On the next slide. So these are the ecosystems of Manhattan today, right? That's what we know, and you can see they're completely different, and they're over a larger area. And then if we go to the next vision. So here's a suburban vision of Lower Manhattan. And this is, not a serious suggestion, oh, we should make, Lower Manhattan like Hicksville, Long Island, right? But it's kind of interesting to think about why we do different things in different places. And this is, a sort of version that has many fewer people, a lot more park space, and no Wall Street. So that's one version, suburban New York. Here's another one. This is the zombie apocalypse New York, right? Where all the buildings are derelict and the old forests are coming back. Again, not a serious idea, but just, trying to think about all the possibilities of a place. Here's a sort of expanded New York. Some people think, well, the answer to climate change is just to build out the city more, right? To build a bigger city and to build big walls at the edge of the city and to actually expand out further into the harbor. So here's another vision for the city. Next slide. Or some, what if we could have some hybrid version, right? That would have some of the properties of Mannahatta, that would have some of the properties of New York City as we know it today. And the next. The amazing thing is when we actually ask people, particularly when we ask adults to do it, what we get is not the radical, but this kind of usual thing where people zoom into their apartment building and they might paint one green roof on top of their apartment building. And then they'll look at those metrics we have and they'll see, oh, it makes a small difference, just a little bit. And then they'll be kind of sad, right? Because that's actually a lot of work to make a green roof. But one green roof by itself probably, it makes an incremental difference, but it doesn't solve the problem. And, I'm really pushing for us to figure out how we solve the problem. And the problem is, how do we make the environment something that lasts and is sustainable and is resilient for another 400 years? So if we go to the next slide, I think it's some combination of the usual and the radical. And what that is, I don't really know. And I'm trying to explore what that is, but what I want to do is get everybody to explore that idea. I don't think that should just be something scientists do or just the city government does. I think that's actually something we all need to be talking about as citizens of the city. And so if you go to the last slide, I'll tell you why this is important in the larger context, which is this is a graph of people on Earth from 1950 to 2050. And the blue line, the blue part of the line is the proportion of people living in cities, in urban areas around the world. And the red line is the proportion of people living in rural areas. And you can see the population from, the population in 1950 of the whole world was about just over 2 billion people. And by the time you're my age, the population of the world will be about 10 billion people. And most of those people are going to live in cities, like New York City. So it's really important that we figure out how to make cities work. And that's, that's why, even though I work in a wildlife organization, I work at a zoo, my work is all about how do we make cities better places for you and for your friends and for your family to live in.
Great. And I think you've given all the students a great tool that they can play around with. What is a immediate impact that they can have to lead towards a more green and sustainable New York City?
Well, I think the most important thing is for you guys to log on and make your vision. So like I said, right now it's just Manhattan. So you can pick someplace in Manhattan. But this summer you'll be able to log on. Next year, next fall, and you'll be able to do the neighborhood around your school or the neighborhood where you live. And I think we all have to take individual responsibility for the neighborhoods we live in, and we need to put forward proactive, good ideas about what the future would be. So if you could do one thing for me, that would be it. If you could do two things for me, do your homework too. Because it's really important to learn the science so that you guys, by the time you're my age and you're scientists someday, you too can build these kind of technologies.
Great, and we actually have a question from the field today. So the question is, will WCS use this tool to influence New York City environmental policy?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. So, New York City environmental policy, we have a lot of conversations with the city about various aspects of this, with the Parks and Recreation Department, with the DEP, with city planning, with the Office of Long-Term Sustainability. And I would say, they're really interested. On the other hand, they're also a little scared, right? Because this is not the usual way of doing it. This is a very democratic, very, very open process. New York City does have an open process, but, like if there's a development in your block, they'll have a meeting about it, and you can go and express your opinion about it, but ultimately the city and the developer and the architect decide what's going to happen within the confines of the existing zoning code and within the confines of the politics of the situation. And this is a new route that's outside of that. And so yes, but we're a nonprofit, right? We're a nonprofit conservation organization, like Megan said, that's trying to make life better for nature in 60 countries around the world, and that includes here in New York City. So.
Excellent. Well, I think that's it for today. So I just wanted to send a huge thank you to Dr. Eric Sanderson for really sharing all of his visions, and now which will become all of your visions at home. And again, you can play around with that website. It's visionmaker.nyc. A huge thank you to our two classes that participated today, so Ms. Stern's class as well as Ms. Rayer's class. Thank you so much for your wonderful help.
Thank you, everybody. Great talking to you.
And you can also watch this. This is going to be recorded and put back on our Google Plus page. You can also view on YouTube as well. So thanks again, and we'll see you back here soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Can't see me because I'm all the way over here.